Hey, we made the promise, and now we've delivered. Check out this special two-part series from the National Wellness Summit live in Nashville, Tennessee. In this episode, we actually have the national president of the Fraternal Order of Police and the director of the National FOP Division of Wellness. We're talking all things officer wellness and support for families. Don't miss this one. Grab your spouse, grab your children, and watch along with us.
Hello, everybody. Here we are, a brand new program, Remnant Revealed. It's exciting. Hello, Rick.
Hey, how are you?
Doing good, man. It's a great day.
We are on the road.
We are. We're on the road. We're in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yep. At the Sheridan Music City.
At the Sheridan Music City.
And they've been great to us.
They have.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Jerry, for all of your wonderful audio help for this program today.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I'm very excited because we have two wonderful people with us today that do so much tremendous great work for officers and officer wellness and their families all over the nation. And we are very excited to have you guys with us today. And I hope you just relax. We do this, we just have great conversation and wonderful time sharing and getting to know more about you, answer some questions, ask some questions, and really just have good conversation.
Yeah, and the whole reason why we're here is because we've talked about it on a couple past episodes, but this is the National FOP's Wellness Summit that's being held here in Nashville. It really is a national standard now for officer wellness. But the key factor in that is not just the wellness of the officers, but also their families.
That's right.
Which is huge.
And the wellness there doesn't mean we come with some tongue scrapers and make everybody go, ah.
No.
This is actually body, mind, and then the part
spirit.
that we talk about is the spirit, right?
That's right. That's exactly
the spirit of man, which is, without that, none of the other parts are working.
That's correct.
So got to go to the core, right? So would you like to introduce our wonderful guests since you serve?
Two of the gurus here with us, two of the
right.
national leaders on this front. And the first and foremost is our national president for the Fraternal Order of Police, Patrick Yoes, who is with us here. And President Yoes, I think it would be awesome if you could just share. Remember, with this audience, it's not just FOP members, right? It's law enforcement throughout the nation, family
That's
members.
right.
We have a lot of folks that are not in law enforcement that watch it to get that perspective. But we also have a lot of emergency room doctors and nurses.
We do.
Other folks that are kind of like in
Actually,
similar professions. Firemen, whenever they're awake.
When they're awake.
They watch
Not
and
in
join
their
us.
recliner.
So, yeah.
Making chili.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, President Yoes, maybe if you could share a little bit about yourself and also about the FOP, I think that'd be interesting for folks, and then we'll introduce Sherri.
Well, Chris, and thank you for allowing us to be here and be part of this. And thank you for coming to our Wellness Summit,
Yep.
Something that we're quite proud of. Rick, you do an amazing job as our national chaplain, and I appreciate the work that both of you do. My name is Patrick Yoes. I'm a retired officer, did 36 years at an agency right outside of New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Wow.
The same agency, did the entire time there, and got involved in the Fraternal Order of Police and kind of worked my way through different parts of the FOP, both on the local and then the state level, and then on the national, and now have the honor to and the privilege. It's something I don't take lightly, to represent 373,000 law enforcement officers across this country.
Holy schmoly.
Recognizing a lot of challenges that we have as a profession.
Right.
And that's really what we're here for, is to give voice, united voice to our members and talk about, we recognize that the jobs that we have are directly related to trust within our communities. And so there's a relationship here that is very, very important. And so our role is to the evolution of law enforcement. It's always going to be changing because it represents people or factors involved in it, and be part of that important discussion so that we can have the best trained, best equipped law enforcement officers throughout this country, and wellness is a tremendous part of that. So thank you both for allowing us to be part of this.
Well, and you say 373,000.
That's a lot of people.
You know, we've talked about this before, but when you look at the statistics, I think most of them say, some statistics say about 650,000 law enforcement officers nationwide. Some will say up to 800,000 when you fold in federal law enforcement and others. But regardless of that total number, 373,000, without a doubt, the FOP is the voice of law enforcement, right?
We've been around for 108 years. Wow. And yes, we are the largest rank and file police organization in the United States, largest police union. And I guess one thing that makes us kind of unique, we're all out there defending our members and you know, trying to build stability into this profession, but at the same time, every one of those local lodges, a little over 2,200 lodges, they all have their own identity, and they you know, service their members in ways that they think that are most appropriate for their communities. And that's really what our strength is.
Well, we always say a bottom-up driven organization.
That's right.
You know, which is very different than traditional representative organizations, which are often top-down driven. And that's what happens when you have a bunch of Type A police officers and personalities, right? Yeah. So.
And you know, Type A, it's hard to take care of Type A personalities. Let me tell you, because they're always taking care of everybody else.
Yeah.
Just getting them to slow down enough to realize that they need help sometimes.
Absolutely.
It's very challenging. You know, in what I do, there's a gift in the Bible called the gift of giving. And the pros of the gift of giving is that they give. They love to give. They love to help people. The other side of that is they find it very difficult to receive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you have to train and teach them that you also have to stop long enough to be blessed or ministered to or helped. And that's what wellness is really about. I think it's getting guys to understand that guys and gals that do this job, this great job on the blue line, to get the help they need. And there's nothing wrong with getting help or saying I need it.
Well, and I think it's a great example of, you know, a lot of times back home, we always talk with officers about it being like preventative maintenance for your car. You know, go get your oil changed.
Yep.
And when officers start seeing it that way, and like a more regular, I don't want to say routine, but a regular component to the job, much like with physical fitness and those other things, but they see that mental, emotional fitness. And now what we're seeing a lot is spiritual fitness as well.
That's right.
Officers are responding to that. And we were talking about today, you know, we break our people by design in this line of work. And I think it's just so remarkable that we have an organization like the FOP that's proactively taking the steps to say, hey, if we can break our people, that means we can also fix our people.
That's right.
And repair our people.
Well, we have a responsibility to fix our people.
That's the key.
We have a moral and fiduciary responsibility to fix, which is broken in the service of others.
Well, and I think that's what's so unique about not just the organization, but your time in this office and your leadership of really driving that. And you've done that by bringing somebody like Sherri on.
Absolutely.
To be the director of wellness. Maybe, Sherri, maybe you could tell a little bit about your background and how you fit into this discussion, but also this whole, I guess it'd be like an objective of the organization. I think it'd be interesting for people to hear that.
Absolutely. So I served 23 years in law enforcement myself.
Wow.
And, you know, I think over the course of my law enforcement career, I lost, so I say this all the time, I lost the same number of coworkers to line of duty death as I did to death by their own hand. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, those kinds of things impact all of us, I think, over a career. And I wanted to be able to change that, right? I think that, you know, the other thing is I have a degree in counseling, so I worked as a counselor with veterans in the VA system. In this organization, which I've been a member of for over 20 years, and in leadership, and I completely believe in what this organization stands for and what it does. And so to bring those things together into the organization to develop wellness initiatives has really been something that I'm proud that we have done as an organization. Having been part of this, you know, for a long, long time, and seeing the way that the FOP has evolved in the way that it focuses on wellness, that's, you know, a credit to the leadership of this organization who recognized that it was important to our members that we make this a pillar of our organization alongside the other things that we're doing. And this wellness summit is really one part of that. It's exciting to us, and by us I mean me and the folks that work with me on my National Officer Wellness Committee, that it grows every year in attendance. We see new faces who bring new ideas, and we grow all the things that we're doing to promote officer wellness in all realms of wellness, right? So not just mental health, but physical health, spiritual health, all those things.
That's why we're here, right? So we're on site in Nashville, Tennessee. This is where we host the annual Wellness Summit. You've got hundreds of law enforcement professionals, but also service providers that come together for this. Just share with everybody a little bit about what is the summit. What are we doing here?
Yeah. So for 2 days, and now actually 3 days, we come together and we talk about all facets of wellness. And what that means is that we have over 20 different seminars that officers, their families, and clinicians or other wellness providers can attend to learn about different topics in wellness. I think, one of the key things about keeping people well is to make sure that they're educated and that they're informed about how they can do that.
Oh, yeah.
We spend a lot of time in law enforcement training physically, training our bodies and training in tactics, but not nearly as much time training in other means of keeping ourselves well and strong. So we like to, and the program changes every year. We look at what's current in law enforcement. We come together as a committee and we talk about, what we think the members of law enforcement are focusing on right now when it comes to wellness. And then we bring in nationally known presenters to talk about those things and teach our attendees about all of those different facets of wellness. I think one thing that's really cool about this particular event is, there are other wellness events out there for first responders, which is great because that movement is growing. But what's really cool about this one is that we have an entire day dedicated to wellness providers where they get to come in and network with each other and learn about current things that are affecting law enforcement, which makes them hone their expertise in working with law enforcement. And then they get to spend the next 2 days interacting with all of the officers and families that are here attending the Wellness Summit. It's a really cool way to build those bridges.
So if I understand it correctly, do you have to be a part of the FOP to attend the Wellness Summit?
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
So see, that's a unique thing that I think we do as an FOP. Is it's not just hey, this is our sandbox and we just take our toys and go home. We actually invite people to the table, which is huge, especially within the profession. So even if you're a part of another labor organization even, or maybe you're not even part of an organization, you're an officer in a town somewhere or whatnot, you still have a seat at this table at the Wellness Summit.
Yes.
What I love about it as a chaplain of over 30 years is when I come, I gain new knowledge about how to help our officers in your local area, right? The guys that are you call them your officers or your people. And so you learn new things. You get to talk out in the hallways or in the vendor areas to those who are bringing new tactics or bringing new things to the table of what officers need or can be used to help them. Always very excellent. I've always enjoyed being here. So,
and then Pat, you talk about, so you've got this Wellness Summit, but you really have taken that approach with other areas, other arenas within the FOP. I think about like the Labor Summit, where it's hosted by the FOP, I guess perhaps facilitated or partnered with the FOP. But you've really torn down a lot of these fences to allow other folks to come in. Why is that?
Well, you look at, wellness is a perfect example, labor as well, but we're all dealing with the same issues. We all want the same end result. The end result is we want quality law enforcement. We want law enforcement officers to be taken care of it. And look, maybe I'm maybe a little ambitious, but we talk about trying to save officers. The weight of the world will make the strongest in knees buckle. And we see that all the time. And Chris, you're exactly right. Law enforcement officers are trained from the very first day that they're in the academy is that they need to take control of every situation because not doing so could cost them or someone else their lives.
Yes, sir.
So then you take a bunch of officers and throw them together, and what do you have? You call it an FOP meeting. They all got to be in charge. You ought to be all have to be in control. But they're also the least likely to ask for any help either.
Yes, they are.
They're always giving, and just that sign of weakness. My job is to be the one in control, and to give up that control is a difficult part. So maybe I'm hopeful. I'll look at, kind of the transition of my 36 years of law enforcement. We didn't talk about these issues, and if you did, you were
That's
weak.
right.
And if you did, you certainly were not going to keep your job. You were going to be, I love the fact that now we can talk about these issues and recognize the damage that has been done during that time. But the realization is that you see officers, we see it all the time, saying, it's just a shame, the struggles they have, not once even stopping to think that maybe we broke them. That repetitive exposure to so much damage that, the average person, we know, you're exposed to a traumatic event, it can change you both physically and mentally. Well, a law enforcement officer is going to get way more exposure to that than an average person. And somehow we think they can sniff their badge and it doesn't affect them, and it's not true.
It's not true.
So
what's that statistic on that, if you don't mind him sharing
well,
that?
A lot of the research shows that law enforcement officers, on average, are going to experience a life-altering critical incident now about once every 2 months over the span of a career of about 30 years.
Yeah.
And
so
the average person
may go through less than a handful
in
their life.
Their lifetime.
In their life.
So what you're saying.
So we have two things here, and one maybe I'm a little hopeful. One of them is it's our job to fix what's broken.
Thank you.
And to it's people in a dark place, it's our job to illuminate a path to get out of that dark place. People who otherwise would not receive that help. And Sherri's right. I've lost many friends to suicide. It's scratching my head saying, what could I have done different? I don't, all of this. The first thing is to actually talk about it. Before, we wouldn't talk about it. We would ignore that it even exists.
Right.
Having that discussion, I think, is the very first step. So all of these things that we're doing here, just having the standards that Sherri and her committee have put together to make sure that what we do have out there is follow some standards, so we're helping. We want every organization, whether they're FOP or not, we want to save officers, because they have committed their lives to protecting their communities, and you know what? We need to protect them as well. Don't look at them and say those officers are acting out because they have some type of behavioral problem. That behavior problem came from the job that they're doing, and it's our job to fix it.
And we love them.
So the second part of this, and this is where I say maybe I'm a little ambitious about it. I don't want to talk about officers that we broke. I want to build that resiliency that from the day they start on a job, the tools that they need, so that we don't find ourselves in these situations.
That's good.
Trying to fix things that are broken. It's coping mechanisms, and so Sherri and her committee do an amazing job of all the work that they do. Could not be prouder of the role that we play, but to answer your question, it does us no good if all we do is just focus. We really are all about the profession. And giving voice to officers and recognizing those trends and trying to jump ahead of them. So it makes no sense for us to not be part of a bigger picture when it comes to officer wellness.
Now, Sherri, you've been the director of wellness, but can you tell people how long has the Office of Wellness, if you will, this initiative within the National FOP, how long has that been around now?
We started about 2019, late 2019, and what spurred that all is that we did a national survey of our membership, and it was really kind of a casual survey, or so we thought, but the response to that survey was tremendous, which was the signal to us that our membership really wanted us to focus on officer wellness. And we started to look at the resources that were out there in the profession for officers who were focusing on their wellness, and found that there were some gaps, and that we were the perfect organization to step in and fill those. If sometimes law enforcement officers or other first responders are not trusting of their organization and the things that they're providing because of that confidentiality fear and the fear that there might be repercussions, or being seen as weak or unfit for duty. And because we are an organization of officers working for officers, we are in a unique position to be able to provide those services where maybe an agency doesn't have the ability to provide them, doesn't have the resources. We're a national organization that has a lot more bandwidth.
And that's huge. We hear a lot of our agencies now that are kind of getting hip to this whole discussion, this whole issue, but this approach with resources, and then that's exactly what we find, right? Is agency after agency, when they're competing for limited resources to begin with, they're very either reluctant or unable to fund those resources that need to occur. So when I find, at least, when you got smaller agencies especially, or challenged larger agencies, financially challenged, that find out that these resources can help be really infused and injected into their agency, they latch onto it like crazy.
Yeah, we find that too.
And that's where I think, again, a tip of the hat to the FOP. The FOP is leading the charge on that. And I think about all the national discussions. Pat, what you do as the national president, you're conferring, you're providing input, you're sitting at the table in national leadership discussions in Washington, D.C., in the White House, in Congress. You testify on these issues regularly. And then we're also seeing funding that's being made possible through grant funding, right? Grant block funding, I guess, but also some of this research. That's what I keep saying is I don't think we talk enough about it.
Thank you.
Some of these findings, some of these studies are only made possible because the FOP has done the legwork to get it together.
Yeah.
You talked about this survey. Really, the FOP has some of the only true national survey data that's available on these topics. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. We, again, because we're a national organization and we're so large, we have the ability to gain a lot of data from our members across the country. But it's really not just, we've surveyed not just FOP members, but police officers all across the country have responded to the surveys that we've put out for law enforcement. And we've done a total of 3 now national surveys. We just wrapped up the latest one a few months ago in 2023, and that data is coming out now in reports and in conference presentations that we're doing. But what we're learning, which is encouraging, is that we are making an impact by having these conversations, by having conferences like this one, like this summit, and that the stigma is reducing.
That's good.
By far.
Yeah.
By
There
far.
you go.
Yeah.
Like Pat was saying, you think about it over all the years, there's never been a time like really these last 5 years where you've seen these walls come down where people are willing to talk about it. Back home in Indianapolis, our agency, thankfully, was one of the cutting edge agencies on this topic. And I've always said this. I was blown away because I really even thought, my gosh, officers aren't going to go for this. They're going to question it. They're going to be leery. They won't trust it. But the game changer was when the FOP engaged on it.
That's right.
So when the officers saw that it wasn't an agency-led initiative, but it was the agency and their FOP, and the FOP was giving it a nod, you would go to roll calls and you would hear somebody talking, and then a seasoned kind of salty dog officer, maybe even in the roll call, would say, "Oh yeah, I've been to wellness. Yeah, that's great. You need to go."
Yeah.
And you'd hear these conversations in roll calls that you would never have heard just 10, 15 years ago.
Ricky, so the credibility of this, again, we talk about, the evolution that I've witnessed. I think that there's a little bit of distrust of going to your agency with a problem that you have, wondering how the ramifications of that, of the struggles that you have might affect your family or your job. By coming to the FOP and the FOP playing this role, there's a more likelihood that they're going to come forward to their union, to their association, to talk about these issues, knowing we have the resources for it. So I think it's great that agencies, do the things that they do, but it's, you cannot ignore the importance of having the representative organizations being a part of that wellness program, because really that's what gives it sort of the credibility amongst against the members and willingness to take advantage of it.
And when you have an officer with so many years of experience that are there on the street, they have been working, they have the evidence of being a strong leader, but they have an issue in their life. The wise thing would be to take care of them and the issue, get them back on their job, doing what they are able to do, instead of trying to go through the expenditures of replacing, or when it could be a simple circumstance of getting them the help or the treatment that they need and putting them right back into work.
And sometimes it's helping them understand that they do have a problem.
That's right.
The first part is recognizing that there is a problem and not finding ways to justify reasons why it's so.
And one of the things one of the speakers said this morning in the main session was that sometimes we're the maker of our problems. Sometimes administration helps with those problems. Then administration should step up and help to be the answer to that problem.
Yeah.
And he was very strong about we need to help and do what's necessary to get them the help that they need.
Now, we're recording this live here in Nashville, and one of the things is we got some folks that are actually sitting in on the recording. I just want to make sure you're clear. We've got sheets of paper out there, so if you have questions for Pat or Sherri or us, fill those out, bring them up here. We'll try to go through some of those while we're here. One of the things that I wanted to ask about is you've now kind of started taking this to the next level. So the next phase in this seems to be really formalizing a strong network of peer support throughout the country. You know, one of the things I see happening now is state by state are laws being passed that provide for peer support confidentiality. Meaning if you've got a professionally trained officer trained in peer support and they're acting in that capacity with another officer, they now have a level of confidentiality which before they didn't, so officers wouldn't talk to another officer. Yeah. You're kind of taking that now and developing this network with a, what do you call it, a peer-to-peer support network.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what your goal is with that?
Yeah, so the National FOP has been granted some funding to create national standard training in law enforcement peer support. That course,
so to set the standard.
To set the standard,
wow.
Yes. Because what we found, Rick, is that, you know, although there were peer support teams are becoming more common across the country, the training standard is not there. Training is, you know, it's some days training programs are 2 days or 5 days, and we wanted to create a standard so that we can build a national network of people that are all trained the same way so that we know they're all speaking the same language. And the reason why we wanted to do that is that there may be an officer out there in a small department who is reluctant to even speak to a trained peer supporter in their
even
agency.
A fellow officer, right?
Yeah, because, you know, there's still the worry of being judged, whether it's real or imagined, it's still a fear. And so to be able to create a national network of trained peers gives that officer another option to reach out to someone who's not even close to them geographically. And so that's something that we're working toward, to get a cadre of people across this country that are trained the same way to support their peers so that we can make those connections. Yes.
Right? That's huge. And so what I'm guessing you're envisioning with that is not only this issue where if you have an officer that doesn't have a comfort level, you can actually connect them to a peer officer somewhere else in the country that wouldn't know them, doesn't have any true individual interest in that community or where they could cause them problems right now.
Exactly.
They got confidentiality and a trust factor. How do you see that blending in with some of the other things that we do? So Pat, you have set these programs into place, not really programs, but just initiatives and efforts that we do where we're distributing personnel, resources throughout the country. The Disaster Assistance Response Team, that's a great example in my mind. Could you talk a little bit about that? Talk about DART a little bit, why that came about and how, but then what you see things like this kind of tying in with.
All right. Well, there's actually two parts of how this came to be. One of them had to do with the state of Oklahoma responding to a tornado and helping during Joplin and the damage done there.
Oh yeah.
Additionally, you know, I lived through Hurricane Katrina, and I was president of Louisiana State Lodge at the time. And overnight on August 29th, I went from being the largest police labor rank and file police organization in the state of Louisiana to having to be so much more, because of my 6,000 members, at least 2,000, 1/3 of them were homeless.
Wow.
Yeah. So I saw the damage that was done. I saw the struggles of families trying to unite them. I saw the struggles of communications, of all of the aspects that you think of law enforcement officers. When there's a disaster in a community, who puts it back together? Well, it's your first responders.
That's right.
Your first responders are victims too.
That's right.
So when they're victims, who's taking care of them as well? And so we recognized the need. I watched it during then. I watched what they did during Joplin, that Oklahoma started. So we really need a national program here. So our focus is to put together a group of. There's a number of states that now have their own disaster response teams, but when we have a disaster, we all respond together. We have a large 53-foot car hauler trailer that's been converted into two-story trailer.
That's something to see if people haven't seen it.
To a huge mobile kitchen, and we do two functions.
That's
Actually,
awesome.
three functions. One, we feed, because I can tell you from experience of living through these things, just a hot meal and somebody to talk to is you just can't put a value on.
That's good. And you went through it personally too,
Yes,
didn't you?
yes. And so the other part of that is who puts their houses back together. They're victims too, but they're out there working everything they need to do to keep community straight. So we've brought this together, put together a remediation teams through a number of sponsors, and we go out and send crews and we do repairs to their homes so that they
to
can
the
stay on the
officers'
job.
homes.
Yes. Oh well, we don't turn anybody away. Mostly we focus on first responders.
Sure.
But we're going to stabilize their homes. The third part of that is that I can tell you there is nothing more, therapeutic when you're in the middle of a disaster and you feel you're a victim, to be able to talk to people that you feel truly understand you.
Oh, yeah.
And so talking to other law enforcement officers, that peer support, that, the whole wellness component of this is something that we can't ignore, because it helps them. It helps with their mind, it helps with their home, it helps with their family, putting it back together. All of these aspects are important, and we couldn't do it if it wouldn't be for literally hundreds of volunteers across this country that every time there's a disaster,
That's awesome.
they suit up and show up and show up in these communities and truly make a huge difference.
If there's any written questions, funnel those around here, and we'll take them real quick if there's any. While they're doing that, let me ask you this. So, obviously, this podcast is called Remnant Revealed, and people say, "Why do you call it that?" Right? And the one thing we know is that we serve a remnant God, a God that takes remnants, scrap pieces that are left over, and makes them whole, and changes lives with just those remnant pieces. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to call it that we've really focused on that, is revealing the remnant, which really is that small subsection of society who dedicates their full resources to taking care of others, and that's the American law enforcement officer, and revealing the character that is behind all of that. Obviously, this is a biblical perspective on policing and life, and we talk about biblical issues of faith, and issues of spiritual wellness. We're finding that people really are responding to that, because it seems to be the missing piece. We're now talking about physical, we're now talking about mental, emotional, and then people see we still got to get at the heart of the matter, right?
The part that gives those other parts that we deal with a lot in wellness, that gives those parts life, is the heart of man, the spirit of man.
That's right.
Proverbs 4:23 says, keep your heart with all due diligence. Keep it, watch over it, protect it, make sure that you deal with your heart. For out of it flow or are the issues of life. So out of your heart, everything else responds in kind from where your heart is. So you got to make sure you take care of your heart as you take care of it ripples out. It doesn't ripple from out within, it ripples from the inside out.
That's right. Yeah. And that's, I think, what people are starting to connect some of those dots on. And it isn't any one arena that stands on its own. It's all three, mind, body, and spirit, all working together, that seem to really make the difference. You've placed a focus on that. I'm a little biased because of the chaplaincy, but why is that, I guess, is my question.
So I think when we look at the overall picture of officer wellness, I mean, there are a lot of components here. I mean, this whole week has been developed on that. But there's one very important one that I think that gets lost a lot because we just don't focus on it. When people are grounded in their faith, it makes it easier for them to cope with a lot of the challenges that are associated with our job. And so we focused on all these other things to fix and never really paid attention to, just the coping mechanisms that come with people that are well-grounded. And that's why I felt that this was so important. As you know, we've had a number of discussions. I just didn't want to have a chaplain. I wanted to have an army of chaplains.
That's right.
Yeah.
That were out there in every community, in every disaster, in every challenge, so that on those darkest days, we can light that path for those that need it.
That's huge.
It is huge.
Man.
And the power of what you're doing is amazing.
Yeah, and look, I have to say, you said the word "I" quite a few times. Let me tell you, there's a huge army here that make these things happen.
Sure.
This is not about. It's not about me. I've got a board that is just 100%. One of the first actions we did when we got elected was said, you know what, the first priority is we're going to create a division of wellness. I don't think we were in office 3 months, and we had this rolled out, and Sherri was in that position, and we couldn't be prouder of the work that's being done by her and the committee. It continues to evolve, and so it should. And do some good work here, is no question.
Awesome.
No question.
Well, I think it's a great thing. I think it's a real feather in the cap of not just the FOP, but the law enforcement profession. Just not just the standard, but the example that we're setting for others and other first responder groups as well. We're seeing fire kind of see, hey, there's a path here. EMS, the medical personnel. We're learning a lot from our military sisters and brothers, many of which come back after serving overseas to serve in their neighborhoods in law enforcement. And I just think it's a truly remarkable thing that we're doing. I want to thank you, Pat and Sherri, for your leadership on this front, for the organization. Surely you have to think about it. But the idea that, I know as a local president, the responsibility you feel for those agencies you represent, state presidents the same way when you were in Louisiana, but you really do have the law enforcement profession, not just the FOP members, but the profession on your shoulders as you're stepping through this. You're providing voice to that. And I know it's a big team effort, but I want to thank you for your leadership in doing that. It's a lot for you, your family, and I hope you keep taking care of yourself as well throughout all
It goes
this.
for you as well.
That's right. That's right. How many days, if you don't mind me asking, how many days a year are you on the road traveling, taking care of these things?
365 days.
Holy shmoly.
300.
300 days.
I think that would be a safe assessment.
That's incredible. That's incredible. 65 days at home, 300 on the road. In a hotel.
I'm grading on a curve.
Living out of a suitcase.
Yeah, hey, but you know what? We're doing some good things. This has been a very challenging time for our profession the last 4 years, and I couldn't be prouder looking back and see the way we navigated through all of the rhetoric and having fact-based discussion and sitting down with people on both sides of the aisle and getting towards a common point. And we could see it. The tide has turned there. And we recognize the value of law enforcement and to the quality of life in each one of our communities. There was a period of time where it was void of having that two-way conversation. We were talking at each other rather than to each other.
That's right.
But we got to the point now where you could see it. And so, you're right. There's a lot of work involved in what we do. Anyone who's a leader in this organization. Yeah. But the product, the fruits of all that hard work,
the labor,
we're seeing it's happening, and our members, they're looking for someone to help them, guide them through it, and there's no shortage of leaders in the FOP.
And there's some powerful words that are in our Bible. One is the word grace, and there's a verse that says, "Where sin abounds, grace much more abounds." And what officers deal with and do every day is they deal with the results of sin. People that are wicked, that do wicked things. But in the midst of that, the Bible says there's a grace. Grace means heaven's help or heaven's power in time of need. There's a grace that comes upon you to do what God has called you to do.
Chris,
and
I got to tell you, I've been at a number of mass incidents where visiting that area and seeing the work that has been done by chaplaincy through Billy Graham's chaplaincy program, watching the impact. I've seen it. I've witnessed it, changing lives, making a difference.
Even in the middle of the
even in the
mire
middle
and
of
the
the
mud.
mess.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Grace much more abounds, and we just pray that God continues to bless and grace you guys for what you're doing here with the Wellness Summit and all the wellness things that you're doing for our officers.
We have a quick question for you before you go here. We're going to bring up a couple more guests, but before we do that, this question says it's for either of you or both of you. Correctional officers have a higher rate of PTSD, divorce, and suicide statistically than any other in the profession. Do you have your own thought as to why?
Wow. That's a tough one, but here's the thing. I think that there is I would think there is a brother or sisterhood amongst correctional officers, just like there is in law enforcement. But one thing that law enforcement officers that say work out on the road do have is they have the ability to escape their environment a little bit, even when they're on duty.
Yeah.
They can go and have a private moment. I don't know that correctional officers have the same ability to do that. They're much more immersed in that environment all the time. And, there could be lots of things that go into that, really. If you think about the dynamics of being a correctional officer, and even the simple fact of being armed as a police officer, gives us a
Good
feeling
point.
of empowerment that correctional officers may not have.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated answer.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can add to it is I know when I worked, enforcement, I worked a beat that was full of, some people that wanted to take advantage of good people, but for the most part, it was full of good people.
That's a good point.
And
right
so,
there.
so you're talking about I walked a different beat than correctional officers do, because by very nature of a corrections facility, they're the element that their population is completely different. So
That's a good point.
So I think it brings to Sherri's point that you have you have a way to escape that environment. To the extent you don't have that in a correctional
They
facility.
can get away from the negativity.
Very powerful.
Well, let's do this real quick. We're going to change out our guests, but before we do that, Chris, I get the opportunity to do this all the time. I don't know that you really have had the opportunity, but would you like to pray over Pat and Sherri as our leaders here
I
in the
would love to.
organization?
Yeah.
Great honor.
Sure.
Yeah.
Father, thank you so much for our time together today. Thank you for the lives, not only their personal lives, but the purpose and the call that has been on President Yoes and on Sherri to continue to do what they're doing to touch officers, bring healing and help in every way possible. We thank you, Lord, that you'll continue to bless them with the budget needs that they have, the money that they need to do the great job that they're doing with all of their teams and everybody that coordinates these efforts. I pray, Lord, that you would bless them with peaceful sleep and rest and all the things that they're so concerned about for others. They also are taken care of by your presence. We love them, we thank you for them, and we bless them and their families. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
And Rick, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you
Thanks
both
for being with
on
us.
here, and thanks for your leadership.
And
Yeah.
let me close by saying this. I can see a number of our law enforcement officers across this country working a night shift, pushing a car, and listening to your words and finding some comfort in it.
Bless
Thank
your
you.
heart.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
sir.
sir.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks for all your support too.
We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back with a couple of other guests, and so stay right where you are. We'll be right back in just a moment. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. It's like you're pros.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Awesome. Water. I'm out.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. Rick and I trust that you heard something that will help your life. And if you believe that it would help others, please make sure and share. Like and subscribe and hit that bell so that you can be notified when the next podcast is available. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.